The wine glass hit the marble floor before anyone could stop it, and in the silence that followed, every pair of eyes in the Harrington Arts Center turned toward the woman standing at the entrance. Not because of the glass, but because of what Sutton Vale said next. Security. She said it the way people say, obviously. Please escort this woman out. The woman at the entrance didn't flinch. She was 31 years old, wore a navy wool coat that had seen better days, and held a small envelope in her left hand. The kind that comes with a formal invitation. Her name was Mirabel Osei-Asante. And in roughly 40 minutes, everything in that ballroom was about to belong to her. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Vale family had been the face of American philanthropy for 2 generations, not in the quiet, humble way, in the way that required photographers, press releases, and a gala every November at the Harrington Arts Center in downtown Chicago. The center itself bore a small bronze plaque near the east entrance. Founding Donor, Vale Family Trust, 1997. Every year, the family arrived early. Every year, Sutton Vale, matriarch and managing director of the Vale Foundation, greeted the room like a queen who had temporarily agreed to acknowledge her subjects. This particular November, the gala carried a new weight. Vale was under pressure to announce its next major arts endowment, a 10-year commitment to fund emerging artists across the Midwest. Several competing foundations had already made public pledges. The family needed a lead investor. They needed someone with vision and capital and the willingness to put their name beside the Vales. They had already found that person. They just didn't know what she looked like. Mirabel had driven herself from the airport. She had a carry-on in the trunk of a rented Kia, a 6 a.m. flight to catch the following morning, and a meeting penciled into her phone for 7:30 p.m. with a man named Jeffrey Vale, Sutton's eldest son, who ran the foundation's investment side. They had been in correspondence for 3 months. He knew her name. He knew her fund. He had reviewed the 30-page proposal she'd submitted in September and had personally called her to say, and these were his exact words, "We've been waiting for someone like you." What Jeffrey had not done was include a photo in any of their exchanges. Mirabel arrived at the Harrington at 6:47 p.m. She had come from the airport directly, which explained the coat, which explained the carry-on she'd left with the valet, which explained why she did not look like the women in the room, who had spent their afternoons in salons and their evenings in gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was not dressed poorly. She was dressed practically, but in a room full of chandeliers and champagne, flutes and women, who had never carried their own luggage. Practically might as well have been a different language. The man at the door checked her name against the list, found it, and waved her through with a nod. She had barely stepped onto the marble when Sutton Vale materialized. Sutton was 63, silver-haired, and wore the particular expression of someone who had spent decades deciding who was worth her attention and who was not. She had a champagne glass in one hand and a sharp instinct, honed by decades of navigating these rooms, and when she looked at Mirabel, what she saw was a woman who did not fit. "Excuse me," Sutton said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "Are you with the catering staff?" Mirabel paused. "No, I'm a guest." Sutton's eyes moved from Mirabel's coat to her shoes to the small envelope in her hand. Something shifted in her expression. Not embarrassment, not reconsideration, just recalibration. "These events are by invitation only," Sutton said. "I have an invitation. May I see it?" Mirabel held it out. Sutton took it, glanced at it, handed it back. Her expression did not change. "Who invited you?" "Jeffrey. We have a meeting this evening." The way Sutton said her son's name in response was a masterpiece of subtle disbelief. "Jeffrey." A pause. "And you are?" "Mirabel Osei-Asante, from the Meridian Fund." If the name meant anything to Sutton, she chose not to show it. She tilted her head slightly, the way someone does when they've made a decision and are simply the formality of conversation, its proper moment. "I'm sure Jeffrey has a full evening. Perhaps it would be best if you waited in the lobby until he's available." "I was told reception started at 7. It does. For guests. The word landed the way it was meant to. Mirabel looked at her. Sutton looked back. Neither woman looked away. It was Sutton's husband, Lawrence Vale, who appeared then, a large, florid man who had the cheerful confidence of someone who had never once questioned whether he belonged in a room. He took in the scene in a single second, misread it entirely, and made everything worse. "Sutton, darling, what's the holdup?" He glanced at Mirabel. "Is this woman lost?" "She's just leaving," Sutton said. "I'm not leaving," Mirabel said. Lawrence's expression shifted into something less cheerful. "I think my wife has asked you to." "Your wife asked me if I was catering staff." "I'm not." "My name is Mirabel Osei-Asante. I'm the managing partner of the Meridian Fund, and I have a 7:30 meeting with your son about a $40 million commitment to your foundation. But if you'd both prefer I take that conversation elsewhere, I'm happy to do that too." The sentence landed in a brief silence. Then Lawrence's champagne glass slipped in his hand. Not much, just a half-inch, and the wine sloshed over the rim and hit the marble. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a small accident in a suddenly very quiet moment. A passing server bent to clean it. Sutton's expression didn't change. But her eyes did. Jeffrey found Mirabel 12 minutes later, standing near the East Gallery, studying a large abstract canvas that had been donated by one of the foundation's longtime artists. He was 35, wore his suit well, and had the look of a man who already knew something had gone wrong. "Mirabel." He extended his hand. "I'm so glad you made it." "I heard there was." He stopped. "I heard there was a mix-up at the door." "There was," she said simply. "He had the decency not to minimize it. I want to apologize on behalf of—" "You don't need to apologize for anyone but yourself," she said. "And you didn't do anything wrong. Shall we find somewhere to talk?" They found a small anteroom off the main hall. Jeffrey had prepared materials, talking points, a folder with the foundation's 10-year projections. He spread them across the table with the careful enthusiasm of someone who had been looking forward to this conversation for weeks. Mirabel listened. She asked 3 questions. Each one was the kind of question that made Jeffrey pause before answering, because each one pointed at something the projections didn't quite address. After the 3rd question, he looked at her directly. "You've done more homework than I expected." "I always do," she said. She had built the Meridian Fund from a single investment at 24 years old, a risk on a small biotech company that no one else believed in, into one of the most quietly powerful private impact funds in the country. She did not advertise. She did not do profiles. She had been approached by every major arts institution in the country in the past 2 years, and she had said no to all of them, because none of them had asked the right questions. Jeffrey Vale had asked the right questions, or so she'd thought. She hadn't been sure, after the lobby, whether she still wanted to be in this room. She'd sat with that uncertainty on the drive from the airport. She'd thought about it while the server at the door checked her name. She'd been thinking about it when Sutton Vale asked her if she was with catering. She thought about the other people who had stood where she stood, who had been looked at the way she'd been looked at, and had quietly left, had quietly accepted the lobby, had quietly adjusted. She thought about what it cost, that quiet acceptance. She thought about what it bought. She had decided, somewhere between Sutton's words and Lawrence's champagne glass, that she was not going to be quiet. She was not going to leave. She was going to do exactly what she had come to do. And she was going to do one more thing besides. At 9:15 p.m., Jeffrey Vale stood at the podium in the main hall and announced the Vale Foundation's lead investor for its 10-year endowment program. He said the name clearly. He said the fund name clearly. He said the amount clearly. $40 million. The room responded the way these rooms respond. Applause, murmur, the particular flutter of people calculating what this meant and for whom. Sutton Vale was standing near the front. Her expression was composed, the composure of someone absorbing information in real time and choosing, moment by moment, not to let the surface crack. Mirabel did not go to the podium. She had specifically asked not to. She stood near the East Gallery, where she'd been standing when Jeffrey found her, and she watched the room process the announcement. A woman beside her, someone she didn't know, turned and said, "Do you know who the investor is?" "A little," Mirabel said. What Sutton Vale did not know, what she could not have known, because she had never asked, because it had never occurred to her to ask, was that Mirabel had been in correspondence with the Harrington Arts Center itself for the better part of a year, not with the Vale Foundation. With the Center's board, the Harrington was privately owned technically by a holding company that had purchased it in 2019. That holding company had been quietly restructured over the past 18 months. Two of its major stakeholders had divested. One new stakeholder had come in. That stakeholder was the Meridian Fund, which meant that Mirabel Osei-Asante did not merely have an invitation to this gala. She had a key to the building, not literally, but close enough that the distinction barely mattered. The board had been careful about disclosure. There were legal reasons for the quiet, but the papers had been filed. The transfer was complete. And sometime in the next 30 days, a new name would appear on the Harrington's founding documents. Not replacing the Vale family plaque, not erasing anything, but added, beside, equal. When Sutton had said these events are by invitation only, she had been standing in a building that Mirabel partially owned. Think about that for a moment. The evening wound down the way galas do. Slowly at first, then all at once. The crowd thinning as couples collected their coats, and the servers began clearing glasses from the high-top tables. Sutton found Jeffrey near the bar at 10:30. "Tell me about this fund," she said. Not tell me about her. Sutton Vale was too practiced for that. The Meridian Fund. Jeffrey told her. He told her about the biotech investment, about the track record, about the institutional reputation Mirabel had built in 10 years without a single press profile. Sutton listened with the same composed expression she'd worn all evening. Then she said, "Why haven't I heard of her?" "Because she didn't want you to," Jeffrey said. He said it simply, without edge. He had a lot of respect for his mother. He also knew now what had happened at the door. Sutton set down her glass. "She was the woman," Sutton said. It was not quite a question. "Yes." From the entrance. "Yes." A long pause. "She didn't say anything," Sutton said, "at the podium, when you announced. She asked not to be called up. I thought she was being modest." He paused. "I think she was being something else." Sutton picked up her glass again. She looked across the emptying room toward the East Gallery, where the large abstract canvas hung under a single warm light. The kind of lighting that costs a lot of money to make. Look effortless. She said nothing else. But her face, for the first time all evening, looked like the face of someone doing real arithmetic. 3 weeks later, a story ran in a Chicago business publication. Not a major outlet. A mid-sized journal that covered philanthropic investment and arts funding, the kind of publication whose readers were exactly the kind of people who had been in the Harrington that November evening. The story was about the Meridian Fund's growing presence in Midwest arts infrastructure. It named the Harrington. It named the board restructuring. It mentioned, briefly and without drama, that the fund's managing partner had attended the Vale Foundation Gala as both a foundation investor and a stakeholder in the venue itself. The story did not mention what happened at the door. It didn't need to. Within 48 hours, 3 board members of the Vale Foundation had called Jeffrey separately. 2 of them brought up the gala. One of them asked, specifically, whether the foundation had adequately vetted its relationship with the Harrington going forward. Sutton did not call Jeffrey. She called the foundation's communications director instead. She wanted to know, she said, whether there was any statement being prepared. The director said there was not yet. Sutton said she wanted to think about it. She thought about it for several days. She thought about the envelope in Mirabel's hand, the invitation she had demanded to see, and then handed back like it was a minor formality. She thought about the moment Lawrence's champagne had sloshed over the glass. She thought about the $40 million and the name on the filing and the article. and the 3 phone calls from board members. She thought about what she'd said. These events are by invitation only. For guests, the Vale Foundation eventually released a statement. It was warm and professional and spoke broadly about the strength of the partnership with the Meridian Fund and their shared commitment to arts access in underserved communities. It did not mention the door. But Sutton Vale wrote a letter, a private one on the Foundation's stationery, addressed to Mirabel directly. It was not an apology exactly. Sutton Vale was not the kind of woman who wrote those. It was something more careful, an acknowledgement, a few sentences about the evening, a line about first impressions, a closing that said she hoped to continue the conversation. Mirabel received the letter on a Tuesday morning, read it once at her desk, set it aside, and went back to work. She would respond. Eventually. In her own time. She had found, over the years, that the most powerful thing a person could do was exactly that. Respond when they were ready, not when they were expected. The Meridian Fund's commitment to the Vale Foundation went through as planned. The 10-year endowment launched the following spring. Mirabel attended the announcement event. This time, arriving in a car someone else drove, wearing something that made the photographers turn. She stood at the podium that evening. Jeffrey introduced her properly, with the full biography, the fund history, the numbers. The room applauded in the particular way rooms do when they realize they are in the presence of someone they should have already known about. Sutton Vale was in the front row. She applauded too. Mirabel looked out at the room. The chandeliers, the marble, the same East Gallery, where she'd stood 3 months ago, studying a painting, while the evening reorganized itself around her. She thought about the woman she'd been that night. The coat, the carry-on left with the valet, the envelope in her hand. She thought about what it had cost to stay. She said what she had come to say, thanked the room, and stepped back from the microphone. On her way out, she passed the bronze plaque near the east entrance. Founding Donor, Vale Family Trust, 1997. Below it, freshly mounted, was a second plaque. Major stakeholder, Meridian Fund. Her name wasn't on it. She'd asked for that too. The fund's name was enough. She didn't need a plaque to know what she'd built, or where she stood, or what the building understood about who she was. She walked out into the November air, pulled on the same navy wool coat, and waited for her car. Some people need a room to see them before they feel real. Mirabel Osei-Asante had never been one of them.